Giving something your all and then failing is one of the best teachers that life can give us. And you should look for opportunities to make this happen. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. My wife asked me last night what I would tell my 20-year-old self if I could. And I started to put together this list, and I thought it was really good, and so I wanted to share it with you guys. So here are 9 things that I came up with that if I could sit down with my 20-year-old self, I would ingrain into my 20-year-old self's head. And you probably heard my fist punching my hand, because that's how important I think these things are. First, giving something your all and then failing is one of the best teachers that life can give us. And you should look for opportunities to make this happen. When I was 20, I thought that if I wasn't amazing at something, it meant that I simply didn't have the talent required to be excellent. And I see now there is so much fallacy in that belief, and I think it prevented me from accomplishing some pretty cool things. So an example of this for me is baseball. I grew up playing a lot of different sports. I played baseball, basketball, and football, all in high school. But baseball was my number one sport. And I was pretty good. Our team wasn't best in the state or anything. But in high school, I started to get recruited by Division II schools. And baseball was something that I spent an average amount of time doing. I went to all of our organized training sessions. I went to, if our team had off-season trainings, I participated in those. I did go to a couple of showcases where I got to put myself in front of some higher level recruiters, and they got to see how I stacked up against a lot of my peers. But I remember above anything else when it came to baseball that I had this belief that when I saw people that were better than I was, I truly believed that they just had additional talent. And I don't have many regrets from my life growing up, but one thing that I do regret is I was terrified to give it my all in baseball and then have that not be enough. And I made the decision when I was in high school, and I had at least 3 offers on the table to go play baseball at Division II schools. I had several Division III school offers as well. And I turned them all down because I was scared that I was going to give baseball my all and then it wouldn't be enough. And I couldn't verbalize that at the time when I was 20. That wasn't something that I thought through. I just firmly believed that I wasn't good enough. And so I made the decision to go to a business school instead. When I say a business school, I went to James Madison University. I studied business there. But what I more mean is I made the decision to focus on academics as opposed to give baseball a shot. And look, I'm not saying that had I given it a shot, something cool would have happened. But the belief that didn't serve me when I was 20 is that if other people around me were better than me at the time, that it just meant that they were more talented. And if I gave my all to something and it wasn't good enough, then what's the point to begin with? And there is so much wrong with that train of thought. And I think it would have been really cool to give baseball my all just to see what would have happened, because I was pretty decent. My high school team wasn't the best in the state by any means. We did go to states, I think 1 or 2 years, didn't win. didn't make it to the finals, anything like that. But I batted either 3, 4, or 5, which for those of you that don't play baseball, typically the most skilled batters or the most likely to get on base or the most likely to drive in runs are batting in that position. I played center field, which is a very skilled position. And I can't help but wonder just what would have happened if I gave it my all. And it was the simple fear of me focusing on something for an extended period of time and then not going pro that prevented me from doing that. And I think when I was in high school, had I understood that if I just put in more repetitions than my peers, then that would likely translate to more talent. Because I didn't spend any incremental time on the sport above and beyond what everyone else on my team was doing. And it's something that I think a lot about. And something that I've learned now later in life is the only reason that we are so scared of failing is not because we're actually scared of whether or not we'll fail, but we're scared of what other people will think of us when we fail. And that was probably the biggest reason why I didn't try to pursue baseball. So I share that first because that was one of the very first things that pops into my mind, and it's something I think about relatively frequently and something I live by now, that if I could just ingrain into that 20-year-old's head, don't worry about living up to the expectations of others, and if you fail, so be it. The second thing that I would tell my 20-year-old self, this is transitioning out of sports here, but leading teams is not a trophy to show other people, or it's not some sort of amazing accomplishment or achievement. Leading teams is a responsibility to care for. And I think about the equivalency of being a parent to leading teams. I don't think there are many people out there that think about being a parent is a trophy to show off. Yet I think a lot of us, especially when we're in corporate jobs and we get promoted and we get the opportunity to lead bigger teams, I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of, ooh, look at me, I'm promoted, and it's this vast achievement that I have accomplished. And I've learned that that's quite the fallacy. When I was 21 or 22, when I graduated college, my first job out of college was an assistant store manager with Target. And I was thrust into this role where, as a 22-year-old, I had 4 direct reports. All of them were older than me. Some of them were more than twice my age. And I had 30 plus indirect reports. And while I had some mild leadership experience, I was president of Spanish Honor Society in high school. I had some other roles in different types of organizations that gave me the opportunity to perform some leadership. Another example, when I was in college, I ran an exterior painting business and I got to hire my own crews. Some of the people that I hired were like some of my best friends, and I learned some very good lessons there. But I got an exposure to leadership from the very early on in my life, and I think because I was put in those positions, there were many times where I thought that that was a big achievement, and it was an achievement, but I undervalued how much leadership was a responsibility. And as I progressed in my career and what I very thoroughly understand now, having my own team of my own business, is the best leaders are great because they genuinely, truly serve others. And that's such a common phrase that I think is thrown out there a lot, but I don't think many people understood it. And at least when I was 20, I don't think I understood it. But every leader that I study who has done things that are really special, they don't have this big personality. They don't have a large ego. They're truly in service of the people that they're leading. And it's almost like they're leading their teams, but they see themselves as below their team, and they're truly there to serve the people that are around them. And that was a very powerful lesson to me. And so just learning that leadership is not a reward for being skilled at something and getting promoted, but learning that it's a responsibility, something to be taken very seriously, and to truly serve others is really the definition of what a leader is something that I think would have really gotten value. I would have gotten value out when I was 20. Especially because in my Target career, as I worked my way up in Target, I got promoted after about 2.5 years. Then I got promoted again after another 2 years, and I got promoted again. Then I got promoted again. And every time I got promoted at Target, I would have more people to lead. And I remember feeling validation because it did feel like a reward that I kept getting promoted. I worked very hard. One thing I'm proud of is the level of work ethic that I had in my 20s. And I think I saw every promotion as recognition for the hard work that I've achieved. And what I would tell that person now is the higher that I go and the more people that I have under me, the bigger weight on my shoulders to truly serve each of them, and the bigger the responsibility. And I think had I saw each opportunity as a larger responsibility with even more burden on my shoulders, which would put even more pressure on myself to perform, then I think I would have taken the role of truly serving the people that I'm leading a little bit more seriously. The third thing I tell myself is, and I thought this one was funny, your Infiniti G35 Coupe 6-speed and your Affliction shirts that you purchase are poor places to put your money. When I was 22 and I was making $50,000 at Target, I went and I bought a $30,000 2006 Infiniti G35 Coupe 6-speed, all black, all leather interior. I mean, this car was sexy AF. And it made me feel great. It gave me a sense of personal status. One of the things that I loved about driving that car is I'd be at a gas station getting gas, and I'd have people twice my age stop, and they would come over to me and they'd say, "Wow, really nice car." And it made me feel important. It made me feel like I had status. It made me feel like they thought that I made so much money. Even though I'm making 50 grand, I spent 60% of my yearly income on that car, which, by the way, I paid off over 6 years and paid off. I got a really good interest rate, but my $30,000 car turned into, I think, just under $40,000 of total money that I put in. And I also spent a lot of money on clothing. I bought expensive clothing in my 20s. And it's funny sitting here talking about it now, like I almost feel embarrassed to talk about these things because it shows you what I prioritized earlier in my life. But it's the reality. That's what was important to me then. And I think helping my 20-year-old self realize that putting money into things because they give me status or because they make me feel important might give me some sort of short-term comfort, or might make me feel good in the short term because I get validation from others and it gives me this sense of status. But man, had I invested $30,000, for example, into learning a skill that could make me $100,000, or had I taken all the money that I spent on clothes so that when I went out to bars every weekend in my 20s, I would, quote, look good, and had I instead spent that on seminars or alternative education to learn how to run a business or whatever skill it was that I wanted to learn, that would have served me today a lot more than it did then. And I think I'd be a lot further along today than I am now. Because I think one of the best things that we can spend money on is ourselves, teaching ourselves things that we don't know, or acquiring skills that we otherwise wouldn't acquire if we don't spend that money. Alex Hormozy says something I love. And even in regards to investment, he talks about, instead of putting money into the S&P 500, put money into the S&M 500. And I'm a firm believer in that as well. And my S&M 500 was putting money in to make me feel like I had status or make me look like I had status, when had I invested into learning new skills, those skills could make me 4 to 5 times the amount of money that I was making in my early 20s. And so while it was fun driving that car for as many years as I drove it, while I had a lot of fun looking good and being out at bars with my friends on the weekends, this need to acquire the feeling of status and voting with my dollars what was important to me at that time was something that did not serve myself today. So making sure that I understood when I'm 20 that if I could simply put that money into acquiring skills or the education necessary to do some pretty cool shit, then that's something that would have served me a lot better than today. The fourth thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is one of the best skills that you can acquire is learning to discern who to listen to. And what I mean by that is I grew up around a lot of people who cared for me and who cared about me. And I know now that it's important that I take advice from people who have achieved what it is that I want. And that advice has to come from somebody who has achieved that specific thing. Right? So listening to someone just because they're close to me and because I respect them, that individual might have good intent for me, but it doesn't mean that I should listen to their advice. And so helping make sure that my 20-year-old self understands that if I'm taking advice on money, for example, not only taking advice from someone that has more money than I do when I'm 20, but taking advice from somebody that has the money that I want to make by the time I am that person's age, I think is important. Or even if it's something as simple as fitness, right? Don't take fitness and nutrition advice from somebody who is clearly not fit or who you don't want to look like or is not as healthy as you want to be. If I want to run my own business, I shouldn't take advice from someone who has not run their own business and is now running a successful business. And I think that's a big one for me because I got a lot of advice from a lot of people close to me to get a secure job. And if I work for a big company, then that's going to help secure my future, and safety and security is important. And now looking back, a lot of the people that told me that, they prioritized security over risk, and they weren't people that ran their own businesses. And I think it's just important that my 20-year-old self understands to be able to differentiate why people are giving you the advice that they're giving you, and who you should really listen to if you're seeking advice on a certain topic. And so, for those of you listening, if you're out there and you're trying to make a big, important decision on your life, and there's a vision or something that you want to achieve, being sure to take advice from somebody who has achieved what it is that you want is so crucially important. And that might mean that you don't listen to your mom, or you don't listen to your dad, or you don't listen to a teacher that you've grown up with and have so much respect for, or you don't listen to an older sibling who has their best interest in mind for you, but who hasn't achieved what it is that you want, and therefore their advice to you is construed in their own model of the world, but may not actually get you the result that you're looking for. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And this is a difficult thing to discern, because one of the hardest things about growing up, and we seek opinions from others about different big decisions and different things that we should do with our life. And knowing who we should listen to and when is a skill that if I had in my 20s, I think it could have changed the course of in the direction of my life. The fifth thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is that your desire to people please is stunning your growth and is preventing you from becoming who you actually have the ability to become, and maybe even who you were meant to become. And that you must die to others, or you must die to yourself. There's no, you can't serve the people around you and what it is that they want for your life, and serve what it is that you want for your life at the same time. It just doesn't work. And so doing things for the validation of others prevents you from accomplishing what you're truly capable of. And I think I grew up with a lot of this type of mindset, where other people's opinions were very important to me. I remember thinking that I would see people who are public personalities, and it was like every single person I saw that was in some sort of public light, there was like 50% of their audience hated them or despised them, or there would always be a large group of people who were in opposition to some sort of belief that that individual had. And I remember thinking in my early 20s that I'm going to be the first person who everybody likes, because it was really important for me for everybody to like me. And I cared a lot about that. And it made me feel bad when people didn't like me. And it made me feel so bad that when I learned that someone didn't like an action or a belief that I had, or didn't like me for some reason, I would go out of my way to try and correct it because it was important to me. And just accepting that, in all reality, the reason why the people that are in the face of the public a lot of times have 50% of their audience despising what it is that they do is because some people, a small percentage, are going to hate you no matter what you do. Then there's going to be a larger percentage who don't have all of the context on your life or your decisions, but who make judgments because that's what they do. And they think it's okay to make judgments. And they're just going to make those judgments based on their own model of the world. And there's nothing you can do about that. The only alternative that you could do is to be so focused on people pleasing that you go individual by individual to break whatever belief patterns that someone might have about you or about the decisions that you've made. And literally, that's all you would do for your entire life if that's how you chose to spend your time. So me accepting that it's not worth my time to go show everybody and justify all of the decisions that I've made, and in order to make people like me, I'm going to make sure that everyone understands exactly why I made each decision or exactly why I did X or Y. That is a very poor way to spend my time. And if I can instead just accept that in order to be true to myself, that means I need to die to the belief of who I should be to other people. And had I understood that much sooner, and had I prioritized who it is that I really want to be instead, I think I'd be a lot further ahead. I'd have another couple decades under my belt of being who I know that I want to be, regardless of what other people think. The sixth thing I would tell myself is that anything of excellence comes from delayed gratification. And one of the best forms of delayed gratification in our early 20s is focusing on learning versus earning. And I think when I was 20, again, I've already talked about how status was important to me. I knew that the more money that I made, the more status I would get, because then it could buy it. Not only could it buy me status, but me making more money than my peer group in my 20s, I think just made me feel like I had a higher level of status. And so focusing on making more money is something that my brain was focused on. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, because had I focused on learning skills that over the course of the long run would have acquired me more money, I think that can serve me. But thinking a little bit more strategically about what are the skills necessary to earn more in the long run. And in all reality, the people who earn the most of them do so by owning businesses. Well, in order to own a business, you have to have a product or a service that you sell and market and then fulfill. And then you have to learn the skill set of leading larger teams and growing those teams. And then you need to learn the skill set of have some basic resemblance of finance, and the list goes on, right? And I think had I understood those ladders and those rungs of skills that I could have built in order to get where it is that I wanted to go, and focusing on learning those skills and prioritizing them over earning the most that I possibly could in the quickest amount of time, then I think I would have been so much further along from an earning perspective. And I'm proud of what I earned. By my early 30s, I acquired a $750,000 net worth, which is not anything crazy by any means, but it definitely puts me up there in one of the top percentiles. But it took me too long to focus on the learning side of things rather than the earning side of things. And so if you're out there and if you happen to be listening and you're in your early 20s, know that what is going to serve your future self the most is by focusing on learning the skills required to be the person that you want to be 10 years from now in the future, versus trying to maximize your earning potential in your 20s. And that's very difficult. And it's especially difficult if you prioritize status like I did when I was in my 20s. The seventh thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is You will unlock your next stage of personal growth. At every stage of personal growth that you are in your life, you unlock the next stage by putting yourself around people who are ahead of you. And that seems basic and that seems common, but it's not something that I put exerted effort to in my 20s. And even if that means, for example, that $30,000 that I spent on my car, had I spent $30,000 to put myself in a mastermind of people that were running multi-million-dollar businesses, those types of people were just far ahead of where I was when I was 20. And I didn't realize that at the time because I thought I was accomplishing some pretty cool things, leading large teams as an executive team leader for Target. You know, I was proud of what I accomplished at the time. But me realizing earlier in life that had I put myself around people who are doing some really impressive things, I think would have gotten me a lot further, a lot faster. And so now, one thing that I do is regardless of where I am constantly putting myself around people who are 2 stages, 3 stages, as many stages ahead as those people will afford to spend time with me. I will put myself around them because I know it makes me better. And doing that earlier on in life when I was in my 20s, I think would have been something that would have served me a lot better. The 8th thing I would tell myself when I was 20 is that risk, as other people explain it to you, and those people are people that care for you and that are close to you, but their definition of risk is only a model of their own comfort zone. And I wish I would have I would sit my 20-year-old self down and literally say, dude, you're going to be dead soon. And everything that you care about in terms of pleasing other people or the status that you're looking to achieve or being afraid to fail if you put everything you have into baseball, like, none of it is going to matter anyways. And if none of it matters because you're going to be dead soon, then why let it bother you now? And a lot of people who gave me advice when in my early 20s gave me advice because they cared about me and they wanted to minimize the risk that I took on. But risk is a pretty fascinating subject. If we're all going to be dead, who cares what type of risk that we take? All right? Everyone, I think a lot of people think about these things like, oh, I want to build a legacy for my kids, or I want to leave this behind, or I want to make sure that they're set up so that they don't have to go through what I went through. When in all reality, none of it's going to matter. I know that in another 50 years, well, maybe 70 years, however many years, I'm going to be dead soon, and my kids, they're going to have no idea who I am. I had a good relationship with my grandparents, but I have no idea who their parents are, and there is nothing about their life that serves where I am today, and I know it's going to be the exact same thing in a couple generations from now. And if that's the case, then this risk that I'm scared of taking is a complete made-up crock of bullshit that people give us because they're scared of their own definition of risk and of whatever their own model of the world is. And when we're 20, we get that passed down to us, when in all reality, none of it's going to matter anyways. And if none of it's going to matter, personally now, I would prefer just to tell some pretty epic stories. And I found that as long as I'm not risking the lives of the people that I care about, there's some level of risk that I take that just makes me a better human being. Because if I fail, and when I fail, it's who I become in that process that actually helps me achieve who it is that I really have the potential to be. And so understanding that at a much younger age, I think would have helped me develop as a person a lot more quickly. Because this idea of being afraid to take risk, or, man, I don't want to start something on my own because I'm making six figures and I don't want to take a step back financially because I'm making good money now. It's all made up bullshit that we have in our heads. And we take this assessment of risk based on our own model of the world. And it's something that just doesn't serve us. And so understanding that when people are explaining risk to me and they're giving me their opinion on what I should or shouldn't do, the definition of risky is completely subjective. And I think had I talked to people that have accomplished what I would define now as like really impressive shit, building businesses that are doing multi-million dollars per year, I think the definition or the advice I would have gotten around risk would have been a little bit different. And so helping my 20-year-old self understand that is something that I think would really serve him. And the last lesson, or the last thing that I would tell my 20-year-old self, number 9, is that overnight successes are typically people who have spent a decade plus in their craft, in the dark, in silence. And all we see in their overnight success is their, quote, rocky cutscene. And I think that's a concept that was difficult for me to understand when I'm 20, because if I saw anyone doing something that was really, really impressive, it was easy to think that, like, wow, they're just really talented. But I didn't see the grind and the hard work that those people have put in for the amount of time that they have put in the work on their craft. And that's something that I think is very underappreciated. I think about somebody like Mr. Beast, who, if you're in the content world, you know who he is. If you don't know who he is, he's one of the biggest content creators in the world, if not the biggest. What's funny about Mr. Beast, and he's young, right? I don't know how old he is. He's in his maybe late 20s, early 30s. Mr. Beast started creating content when he was a teenager. And so by the time he was in his mid-20s, he had already been doing it for 10 years. And that's kind of crazy to think about. And I think we very easily attribute seeing someone like Mr. Beast succeed in their 20s and think about, like, wow, he's very talented, or I wonder what luck he might have had growing up that put him in the position that he is to accomplish the things that he's accomplished. When in all reality, like, granted, everyone that's done some really cool shit has had some luck, but luck is created through hard work consistently over a period of very extended time. And it's kind of neat to think about the fact that Mr. Beast has been creating content for well over 10 years. And he's been so focused every year on just becoming a better content creator that him doing that for a decade plus is what has gotten him to where he is now. And this could be attributed to anybody, right? Think about The Rock. The Rock is probably one of the biggest celebrity names of all time right now, and he has done an amazing job with his brand. The guy started as like a WWE wannabe. And if you watch him earlier on in his career, he went from WWE, maybe at best okay actor, and then he turned into someone that was very good at WWE or WWF, whatever it was, because he did it for an extended period of time. And then the first movie that he was in as an actor was nowhere near the movies that he's in now. And then so he worked on his acting craft for a decade plus. And then he was able to perform and act in some of the top grossing movies of all time. And now he's this major personality. And in all reality, The Rock has put in many decades of consistent work, and that has made him who he is now. And so I think about that a lot, that anyone who is making more money than I am is probably someone that I can learn from. And I always think, what can I learn? And I always tend to look back at like, wow, how long have they been working on their craft? What have they learned over that time period? And I think that's something that if I could sit my 20-year-old self down, I would ingrain into his brain and make sure he understands that everyone I see doing cool shit, the Rocky cutscene that I see, is just a fraction of the hard work that they put in. And what that means for me is that if I put my head down and I'm very clear on what it is that I want, and I go work on it for the next decade in the dark, in silence, then when I emerge from that silence, because of what I've created, I'll know that that's a result of what I've built over the past decade plus. And that's what I'm doing now. And me creating this podcast is putting myself in a little bit more of a light. But I'm doing it because I think had I had something like this podcast when I was 20, that it would have helped and served me. And so that's my hope here, is that you guys are getting something out of this that can serve you as well. But I know that was kind of a longer one and maybe a little bit more pensive than some of my other content. But my wife asked me that question. I made some notes and I was like, wow, these are some pretty good things. And I want to share it with my audience in the event that it can help them. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did enjoy that, or if you know somebody that you think even one of those messages would appeal to somebody, whether it's earlier in their life or even later in their life, share it. I would really appreciate if you could share it with somebody. That's how this podcast grows, is the more people that share it, the more people that listen to it, the audience will grow. So it would mean a lot to me if you did that. Thank you for your attention. I think this is 2 podcasts in a row that were a little lengthy, and that means if you made it all the way to this point, you have given me more attention than I could ever ask for. But I really, really appreciate you guys. I love you guys. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.